Hey there, guys. Welcome to this ultra special episode with my very famous guest that I've got on. I do have the man who runs Dentists Who Invests podcast on with me today, Dr. James Martin, who will actually give us a massive insight as to one of the most important things in my life, which is kind of the financials. And I know a lot of people steer away from this conversation. It's almost a taboo topic, but we're going to lay that bare for everybody to show that actually it's more or less a requirement for a happy lifestyle and also something that can actually help in a generational sense as well. So let's really get into this. Start with a quick introduction. Doc, over to you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and then let's just dive into it.
100%. Well, first and foremost, thank you for that introduction today. That was very kind. And listen, I can assure you that from my side, I am so grateful that you thought about me and to have me on the podcast. I'm humbled that that you go out of your way to have me on here. So I just want to say that first of all. Hopefully some of the listeners are potentially familiar with my content. If you're not, I run a platform called Dentistry Invest. My full name is Dr. James Martin. I'm a dentist, like I'm sure the majority of the audience on this podcast are. However, I left dentistry about 3.5 years ago. It's because of that platform that I just said. And what that is, I'm sure we can get into it as the podcast progresses, with regards to the philosophy of why it was created and what it does, and also a few of the things that I've learned along the way whenever it comes to money. We can get into that in just a second. But in essence, there's two things. There's only really two things that dentists need help with when it comes to the money. Number one, boost their income. So it fairly reflects the value that you're given. Second side of things, understand a little bit more about what you can do with that income in terms of investing. Do you want to do it yourself? Do you want to do it through a professional? A little bit of both. Everything's on the table. And that is what Dentistry Invest is in a nutshell.
Amazing stuff. I love the little summary there. First question I'm going to pose to you, right? And this is maybe almost philosophical, maybe it's a personal thing. Why is money so badly demonized in our society? Like first and foremost.
You know what, right? There's a saying that I love, and just for context, guys, everyone who's listening to this podcast, there's no everything that comes out of our mouth right now is ad hoc. And something that just came into my head when you were talking just then is a saying that I love: seek first to understand and then be understood. And the reason why I like that logic is knowing more about something can only ever help you decide on whether or not it's something that is useful for you or valid. And I think us as human beings, we make decisions out of what we know or what we've heard so far, but how many of us can truly say we're informed on the things that we're speaking about, right? And listen, that's not to say I am, but what it is to say is it's a continuum, right? It's not a binary thing. I'm informed or not informed. It's to what degree am I informed?
Yeah, I'm liking that.
And surely the further we can perpetuate ourselves along that journey is the more authority we can speak on that matter. And I feel like when it comes to the money side of things, the more we know about that world is the more we can decide, actually, is that something we want to think about? And to what degree do we want to think about it? It can only ever be a good thing. And that's the purpose of Dentistry Invest, to share as much information as possible on that front. So when it comes to answering your question specifically, I feel like that would help. I feel like one of the biggest belief shattering moments for me, which made me see things really differently, was when I figured out what money was. There's actually 4 different types of money if we want to get really deep on this.
Oh, I like it.
We'll keep it high level for today because that's probably
okay.
Like an explainer in and of itself. The money that we use today is effectively printed, created, and made up by the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve. So the second that you know that something is just printed and made up, how can anything that we believe or know about that area be anything but made up and subjective and constructed as well?
I like it. Mind
and we could get really deep on that, right? And this is the thing. And that's not to say that it's right or wrong. It just gets us to question what we think we know already. Because this is the thing. It must have been projected onto us at some stage. It must have been a belief we either formulated ourselves or was given to us by somebody else. And how do we know it's accurate? How do you know anything's accurate? Yeah, all I'm doing is I'm calling that into question. And that might be a little ethereal and airy-fairy for a lot of people who are listening. Perhaps, I don't know. And maybe once upon a time, I saw it sat in that camp as well. But what I'm going to ask everybody to do is just go with me and just roll with this for the moment.
For sure, 100%.
I'm going to read a little further into that. Look up fiat money, F-I-A-T, not the car, fiat money. Look that up, right? Because that used to confuse me for a while back in the day. I was like, what's fiat got to do with this? But anyway, But anyway, nothing is the answer. Not Fiat, the car company, Fiat money. Look that up and look up the story of the Bank of England and tell me that that doesn't make you see things slightly differently, because it is crazy when you start digging into it. You've got to be careful with this stuff, because you definitely don't want to come across as conspiracy theorists or anything along those lines. And I actually hate that mindset what people have, where they just question everything that they hear.
Everything, yeah.
Anything the government says, they immediately believe the opposite and think they're right. You know, like that.
I might be one of those. I might be one of the. I'm not going to lie to you. I think we've all slowly started losing trust in the government. I think things like fiat compared to backed currencies, you know, you start getting into a very shady world, and you start thinking, right, the powers that be controlling everything, and maybe that is the reason why we deem money so evil, right? Because the roots of it, in the way that we see it in the modern world, are actually quite evil in that sense. But really, we can almost flip it on its head and use it for the right reasons, be that on a personal level, for our family, for our friends, our loved ones, for our local communities, for example. We look at philanthropists and what they're doing for society, and they can turn this almost evil concept on its head and do so well with it. But obviously, it's all about mindset. It's all about mentality, and not seeing it as an evil concept, right? So how do we kind of break those shackles and see it as almost something that serves us rather than the other way around?
Sure. So yeah, to build on what I was saying and to add in what you were saying, the very first thing to think, all these beliefs and things that people say, the first thing to figure out is, because of what I've just said, it just casts it into doubt. Are those objective fact, or are they subjective?
Yeah.
Well, we know that if money is literally a construct that's constructed, right, a societal construct that's made up by somebody else, that's the very second that we also know that our beliefs must be constructed as well, rather than the objective truth. That's the second, right? And the second you know that, it's not black and white anymore. It's more of a gray area.
Yeah.
And then we start to think to ourselves, okay, cool. Let's just introspect those. Let's just think, how valid are those? Are they necessarily true? Because it's very easy to parrot things that we heard once upon a time and never actually deconstruct how valid they are. And you make a really good point. Money is the root of all.
I'm not saying it. I'm not going to be the one. You'll never quote me saying this, because they're going to use that in the future. So I'm not saying it.
Good. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, right? But I'm sure the audience out there, some people might have filled in the blanks on that one. Yes. Who the hell knows how they might have filled in the blanks? Might be something to do with what we just said. Who knows? But anyway, so money is the root of all evil, is what a lot of people say, right? And I think it's like so easy to parrot that, right? And I think that if we think like that, it lives somewhere in our subconscious, and we're averse to it. Right? Yeah. And it's like constant, it determines our actions. But what we have to think to ourselves is actually just literally is what you were saying. If you earn some more money, let's say you earn, I don't know, an extra £10,000 a year, and you give away 50% to charity, right? Have you not actually done some net good there? Right? You've earned more, but you've also distributed more. So is that not a net positive in the world? To me, it is, right?
100%.
Yeah. So here's the thing. If we're saying that it's objectively only a negative thing, well, there's literal evidence right there that it actually can be a positive thing. And it's all about how you harness it. So to me, to say that that is consistently and always true, if you think about that for 2 seconds, doesn't make sense. Right. But if that lives inside our head somewhere and we don't question it, it's determining our actions in subtle ways that we don't even realize.
All to do with the mindset. This is all literally to do with how you perceive things depending on what you've been told, right? So influence is key here. I'm liking the way you're going with this. So I'll let you continue, because this is very interesting stuff.
That's good. That's good, man. It's awesome. And it's all about, I guess, what we're aiming for today in this podcast is not to say what's right or wrong. We're just circling back to what I was saying at the very start. The more info we can share about this stuff is the more we can get people questioning what they believe and know about it, what they believe, or, you know, the things that we think we know. And listen, that's true about every area of your life. And that's not to say you and I are experts. What it is to say is we've heard this other stuff. It made it think differently. And we share that in the hope that it positively helps other people. That's all where we're coming from. And that's the best way of looking at it. So yeah, I guess the next extension to think is, if you think about that, if we just hone that in a little further, and we're kind of going on a little bit of a journey here, the next thing to think to ourselves is, okay, cool. Then if we now acknowledge that actually it can be a positive thing, why are we so damn scared to talk about it?
This is the thing, right? It's like, it seems to just be a pigeonholed into this one evil entity, and then that's it. Like, it's almost like, don't ever believe that there's any good in this. And you've pretty much just, like, you know, blown the lid off that and said, well, I mean, if it's all dependent on your mindset, and you can make it a good thing. So, okay, let's go with that. So now all of a sudden we can see the positives in it, and then it becomes something that we should almost put some focus into and some of our energy into, right? But I think this is the area that we maybe slip up on, and people just don't know whether income should be a case of a 9 to 5 and that's it, or there's more facets to it. And this is kind of like, this is what I would deem you somebody who knows their stuff inside out with, and obviously you can impart quite a lot of knowledge when it comes to this topic. But why do we then have the next step is for most people to think is, right, I just need a high paying job and work 9 to 5 and that's it. Like, surely there's more to life than just that.
Well, this is a really interesting thing about dentistry specifically, because there's things that we can talk about on this podcast. There's things that you can invest in when it comes to your abilities, that you can literally go in on Monday, serve someone to a higher standard, do better dentistry, and then by default, as a side effect of that, almost make more remuneration. Whereas if you think about most careers, like 95% of careers, it's a little bit like this: salary, I don't know, 50K a year, 50K a year, promotion 2 years later, 55K, 3 years later, promotion 60K. It's very, how can I say this? It's very flat, and then it takes these sudden jumps. Whereas dentistry is not like that. It's not linear in that sense. It can vastly expand overnight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that there is sort of two ways we can look at that, really. The first way is to think to ourselves, wow, what a momentous career that we're in, that there is scope to do that. And then the second side of things is to just think to ourselves, right, okay, well, we gotta ensure that whatever we're giving to these people, that however we're serving the patient in terms of treatment, well, it actually is fair and deserving of that value that we're generating as well. It all starts with giving more. And there's a really simple analogy here. If I give someone a Lamborghini, then that's obviously worth way more than a Fiat Punto. Let's say that, to go back to
the Fiat.
Yeah, that's back to the Fiat. So if I said to somebody, hey, do you know what? I'm going to charge you £20,000 for this Lambo. Probably people would take me up on that, because the car's like $250,000, and I don't know like a great deal about cars, but I do know that, right? Whereas if someone said to me, hey, do you want to buy this Fiat Punto for 20,000? Well, that's a completely different conversation. And maybe there are Fiat Puntos that are worth 20,000, but by and large, that's not a good deal, right? So my point is, the price is exactly the same, right? The investment is exactly the same. It's more about what the person got in return that determined whether or not that was a good deal. So if you can make your dentistry, the Lambo dentistry or the Audi dentistry, work really hard on it, well, then you have scope to be able to generate more remuneration. And actually, if you think about it, to take that one level deeper, people pay for quality all the time, man. People buy Lambos, right? So you know that those people exist, and now you're just positioning yourself so you can be that dentist, or you can be that person, and then be deserving of that remuneration. Let me pause there. I've got a little tiny bit more to add to that. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah. So far, this is literally bang on. I'm loving it.
Boom, right? And this it's kind of simple when you deconstruct it, but I guess we just don't really get the opportunity to think about it in like 9 to 5. Do you know what I mean? Because we're so busy just doing things, So anyway, I love that mindset, right? And actually, you might argue that we've actually helped that person even more because we've given them something of higher quality. So I think that's the first thing to do. And then the second thing to realize about dentistry is, I feel like we are conditioned to believe that we have to wait until we're 55 or 60 until we're retired to be happy, right?
Do you know what scares me about that mindset? Is that would only give me about 10 to 15 years worth of work. And that's why, like, I think I'm fortunate that I've come in at the age that I have with dentistry to see it differently, because I'm forced to see it differently. Otherwise, this doesn't make sense. But I 110% agree with what you're saying. It's such a natural mindset for like dental students, newly qualified dentists, to just think, right, I want to work for the next, 35, 40 years of my life plus and retire. And I just don't get it. I just absolutely do not understand the concept. But you were going to deconstruct that further, so I'm going to let you carry on with it, because this is the part where I'm kind of just like, come on, guys, this should be obvious, right? So I'll let you continue.
No, it's cool, but here's the thing, right? It's actually we all have psychological biases as human beings, right? And one big psychological bias we all suffer from to a greater or lesser degree is we futurize our success. And we say to ourselves, when I hit this point, when I have this, I will be happy.
Oh, I do that a lot.
We all, and I do that. I do that. I at least I'm to diminish it, to work on it. You got to be aware it's happening.
Right.
Right. And it doesn't mean that I have got rid of that. I do that every day, but at least I know that it is doing that. And I'm working on it. Let's just say, we're all working on it. Right. Yeah. Everybody's on that tangent. It's a continuum, just like we were saying before. Sure. It's not we have it or we don't. I was a little bit suspicious when you see these people online and they're like, I'm just so happy in the moment. Everything's great. And I feel like that's where social media is a bit like, man,
yeah, absolutely killing it.
I think when you see stuff like that, there's two real mindsets. You can either be like, yeah, fuck it, that's not impossible. Pardon my French, by the way. But yeah, you can say that's not impossible. Or you can say, right, okay, if they are there, I'm happy for them. How can I get closer and improve myself? And I feel like the second one is a healthier mindset, even though it's super easy to be cynical about this stuff. But anyway, we're going on a little bit of a tangent. Just to pull this back, it's a bias, and 99% of humans suffer from it, right? I feel that when it comes to the finance side of things, that actually plays to that, because we say, right, well, when I'm 55, it's like the promised land, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
Oh God, you have to go to work and make some money, but I'll be retired in 50 years, and then everything will be great, sort of thing. And it will. Don't get me wrong, maybe it will be, right? But my point is that there's no guarantee that we're actually going to make it there, and that as well as that, who's to say that we can't be happy in the here and now? An engineer reality to facilitate that. Like who made that rule up? Yeah,
that's it. Yep.
Who made that the hell up? Now it just so happened. Whilst the first thing to do is accept that that's possible, and then the second thing is to think to yourselves, right? How can I facilitate that in the here and now? Yeah. Now chances are that if you're working 7 days a week, well, you probably wouldn't do that through complete freedom of choice. Right? Most people would not choose to do that. But what someone might choose to do is like 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And you have to just figure out how that looks for you. Or maybe you do 0 days a week in dentistry and you do something else. I don't know. But the point is that we got to figure out what is our version of happiness. And that sounds simple, but it's really hard to do.
It's so hard to do. Because what do you bring? See, this is the thing that I always kind of like converse people about. I'm a firm believer in keeping your standards high, and that almost then makes you feel as though, do I have to bring my standards down to allow myself to only have a 3-day working week? But then surely there's a way, right? And this is again kind of, you know, where all of your expertise comes into this. Surely there's a way to make your money sweat more. Surely there's a way to be smarter with what you do with your money, to have maybe a passive income, or, you know, do more with the hours that you do apply yourself in during that working week. And I guess, you know, yes, it's a mindset shift, but how do we ensure that our standards aren't dropping, but we are finding more time in the day to actually do the stuff that we love, rather than, like you might have mentioned, like, you know, a 7-day week or an 8-day week in some cases, where people are working crazy hours just to kind of achieve those standards. And then let's kind of almost hone in a little bit on dentistry as well. How does dentistry allow for that kind of enjoying your life with the high standards, doing maybe fewer hours compared to your average, and still being a well-rounded career that you're not just burning yourself out in? How does dentistry tick that box?
Well, the cool thing about dentistry is there's a few things you can move around in order to make that happen, which we'll circle back to in 2 secs. So here's the thing, to what you just said. If you think about it like this, right? Okay. So let's say for most people, they've got their ideal balance. Yeah. And balance is a word that gets thrown around a load on Instagram and all this stuff. Yeah. And I want everybody to remove those airy-fairy, wishy-washy connotations just for a moment. And we can just keep it real with the word balance, right? How does that look? Maybe it's like, let's just pull something out of the air, and it won't look like this for most people, it won't look like this for some people. It mightn't even look like this for most people, but it might look like this for some people, is what we're getting at, right? So let's say that word balance is 3 days a week in the clinic. Now, it could be 0, it could be 7. I don't know, for the person. Some people love dentistry so much they want to do a 7, right? But my point is, let's talk about 3, because that's something that some people aspire to, yeah? And then the other 4 days is, how can we say, you've got your time machine on, you can do whatever the heck you want. Yeah. So most people don't have 3 days, they're on like 4 days and 5 days. So I would posit, not everybody will feel like this, but I would posit that a lot of them would. If you ask those people, hey, what is holding you back from going from, if you would love to do 3, but you're currently doing 4, 5, 6, what is holding you back from where you are to where you'd like to go? Like going to your principal and saying, hey, can I drop a day, 2 days, 3 days, something along those lines? Yeah. And there's a thing that 99% of people say back to me when I ask them that question. And I'm curious if you can guess what it is. It's a gimme. If this was, what's that show called? Family Fortunes. Right?
Oh, okay.
This could be like the only answer, and they would have like 99 people replied.
No, wait, I can't. Do you know what? You're asking the wrong person, because right now I'm just like, I wish I had that. What he's talking about, like if I could have the 3-day a week thing, yeah, I would take it, and I would have no excuses to make that happen. The only thing that would hold me back, I don't know. I guess dropping income. Would that?
There you go. Yes.
Okay, right.
Yeah. It's the I word, right? Because everybody's like, oh, well, if I drop a day, I'll lose this much, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's true. Yeah. But again, can you see, just to pull this back to what we were saying at the very start, if we have this inherent belief that it's bad to talk about money, but it's also the single biggest thing that's actually going to let us live that life.
Exactly.
It
makes no sense.
It's a paradox. It's like pulling us 2 completely different ways. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right. I'm just pointing out that there is a tug of war of energies there.
Yeah.
All I'm saying. Yeah. And it's very important that we proceed in this podcast in that spirit. No right or wrong. Just interesting lines of thought and schools of thought.
Perfect.
With me so far.
With you so far, but now I'm intrigued as to how do we make that 3-day a week working week work, because I want that, right? That's what I'm aspiring to have. So please enlighten us, or at least enlighten me, because I'm all in for this.
You know what I love, right? We didn't actually plan this podcast in any way, and we kind of went on this. It's almost like we're telling a story sort of thing. It's kind of, we can see it like building as time.
For sure.
It's funny, right? And you know what? It's interesting. Here, what I would say, right? So we know it's the I word, right? So if you actually if you go one layer deeper and you deconstruct where income comes from, it can only come. It can categorically, comprehensively only come from one of 2 places. It's either going to be your dentistry, or it's going to be your assets, like your investments. It can only be one of the 2.
Yep.
So then the question then becomes, how can I engineer both of those things so that it gives me the I number that I want, so that I can do the number of days a week that I want to do and live the life that I want in the here and now, not put it off until 60, but also have some additional profit and cash left over so that I can invest that in assets. And then when it means that I can't do my 2-3 days a week anymore, when I am 55, 60, whatever, that I have a significant enough portfolio that will generate me enough income to sustain me entirely.
Bingo. I'm gonna make you spill some secret sauce in a minute and give some, if it's okay with you, to give us some like model ideas, right, as to what might work in your experience, what you've seen that does and doesn't work, and what you would recommend and suggest, right? But just before we get there, just for any of the maybe younger listeners or listeners that haven't really gotten into investing per se, because a lot of people might have just been living at home, straight into uni, finished that, don't really have that kind of income. This might be their first job, for example, and they may have no idea as to the difference between assets, liabilities, the difference between assets and maybe accessories. What is a good buy? What's all of the bad things, the red flags to look out. So is there like almost a summary version that you can probably provide anybody so they're up to date with the jargon before we get into the next bit?
But this is bloody brilliant, right? Because this is actually the hard part as well. Yeah. Like this is literally the hard part. All the stuff that we talked about so far, it's, how can we say this? Whenever you break it down in the right way, it's pretty objective. Do you know what I mean? There's, to me, it's like, it's either this or this, but then the devil, that's like high level. And then you get into the specifics. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like, hey, we're going to do a root canal. But there's a billion ways to do a root canal, right? And there's the ways that are more conducive to success and the ways that are not so conducive to success. I basically made that analogy up on the fly.
I love it. And it was dental related, so that's even better.
I think it kind of works. Maybe we'll just not think about that too long because we'll probably find some ways that the analogy will break down. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. All right, cool. So anyway, where were we? So we know it's got to come from one or two places. It can literally either be your dentistry or it can be your assets. Yep. So you just got to figure out what combination will give you the balance in here and now. And remember, you're still actually doing some time in the clinic at this stage. So it's very possible that some of that can come from your dentistry. And then you can start contributing more of it over to the investing side of things. So how does that look, I suppose, really is the next natural question. So to answer your question, I have a partner in Dentistry Invest, and we do a lot of stuff together. And his name is Luke Curley. So shout out that guy. And he knows loads about finance. And I always remember when we get to know each other a few years ago, he showed me this thing. And he was like, James, if you think about assets, like if you think about your assets, there's only actually fundamentally four types of assets, which I thought was really cool because my brain just works like that. It's like, okay, is it this or this or this?
Feel free to use the board behind you, by the way. I don't know if it's mirrored.
I was thinking that, right? How much time have we got today? Do you know, because here's the thing, here's the only thing about this explainer. It takes like 20-30 minutes in and of itself. That's the only thing. And I was thinking, and there was like a little bit of a turmoil in my head there. Do we do this? Do we not do this? Here's what I would say, right? I actually released a podcast on this really recently. And it's episode 300.
Okay, I'll link it. I'll link it to this video. So if anybody wants to check it out, they can.
Totally worth it. And that podcast, in and of itself, I think that's 40 minutes off the top of my head.
Okay,
so
nice.
To do it justice, and by the way, that's a solo podcast, so it's me like blah, 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 like that. Are you with me? So what I mean is that's not even any back and forth between me and somebody else. That's pure
info. I love it.
Chunky explaining. Are you with me, right? It's like a pure, it's 100% that, and it takes that amount of time. So that's what I would say. But what I would say, high level, what I would say is this. I would say, first of all, figure out the combination. Is it from the dentistry or from your assets? It's going to be both. No, we just got to figure out what proportion is which. I feel like sometimes people put too much onus on the assets and investing side of things, as in they think that it's going to make them money overnight. Right. And it can make you wealthy with time. Right. But put it like this, like a pension or an ISA. The whole point is you're supposed to let them compound for as long as possible. Yeah. Right. So you're supposed to not touch your money. You're not supposed to sell it off and take money out, which precludes the fact that you're going to be able to take income from it for like 10, 20 years, 30 years. Yeah. So if you want that and you want to have more balance in here and now, definitely think about that strategy, but maybe just get a really good idea of how accommodating that's going to be to you doing less time in clinic. And it's actually, if you ask me, there's better ways personally. Yeah. Like for example, potential. I'm not saying this is the way, but potentially if you think about property, the thing about property in the UK is it's taxed into oblivion, but at least you're going to get some cash flow from it, right? Because you get rental income. Yeah. But don't get me wrong. I don't want everybody to go and rush off and buy buy-to-lets after this. You have to know what you're doing. The people who I've seen who are most successful in property are so dedicated to it. Like it's all they do. Yeah. Whereas people who maybe kind of pick up a buy-to-let here and there, it'll make some money, but they could probably be doing a lot better if they knew. Like the more you know about something, the better you are at it. Invest in things you know, right? So whilst I am saying it's important to do the investing side of things, maybe just think about how you can get your dentistry to a stage where it gives you the income that you want as well. And usually that is the most belief shifting side of things, because people are not necessarily aware of how well they could be doing whenever it comes to the remuneration on that side of things. And actually, in my opinion, they could, generally speaking, be doing a little bit better. But anyway, listen, here's the thing. I am definitely not the be all and end all whenever it comes to this stuff. I am simply sharing what I've seen, what I've observed that definitely worked for me. I've definitely seen it work for others. And even if it's not 100% the solution for somebody, even if we have like 60, 70, 80% of a solution for somebody or something that's going to help, we've done a good job on today's podcast. And even I always find if you have a little framework through which to make decisions, which is basically what we've just talked about today, that helps so much.
I'm with you. I'm liking that. I think that's kind of what we do need to take away from this, at least, during the discussion. That's definitely helpful. It kind of puts things into perspective, and we definitely need that perspective rather than just dive in. And I think one major point there you mentioned as well, I think it's always bounded around, isn't it? That just buy a property, you'll be fine. But not every property works. Like it does. It's not as simple as that. And quite rightly so, actually. Putting all your money into a property that might turn over a little bit extra, you could actually be investing that in yourself, maybe doing more with your dentistry, maybe investing in a different facet entirely. So actually understanding what you're putting your money into is very important. So speaking to people like yourself is quite helpful. I think winding it back a little bit, there's kind of like almost an amount that a dentist should invest in themselves as well, right? Because you want to upskill to a certain level, but then we can get quite easily lost in maybe the dimension of how we are upskilling. Sometimes we, draw ourselves too thin and we're doing too much of everything, or we're kind of, or should I say too little of everything, or sometimes we're doing too much of one thing and then just like narrowing ourselves down completely. What's kind of a sweet spot that you would say is a good way for dentists to kind of maybe, again, this is completely your opinion, right? So I'm not saying that, this is the be all and end all, but it's nice to get advice from somebody who's been there and done that. What would you say if you're advising me, let's say? So I'm coming out, I should be graduated when I'm 40 and probably starting work when I'm 41 with a couple of months in between, right? So for somebody who's catching up on lost time, who wants to earn as quick as possible, make a name for himself, and then potentially go into practice ownership, because that's kind of how I see it, right? What would you say would be the quickest way to streamline that? So we use me as an example, because I know it's quite hard to sort of just say this is a pill for everybody, right? So let's use my case study and you advise me for the listeners.
Cool. Okay, so two things which will pre-frame what I'm about to say. So first of all, the first thing to accept is that there, just as what you were saying, there's no one size fits all easy solution. Like there just isn't. There's too many variables in there.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel where the whole financial advice world falls down a little bit is it's too prescriptive. It's like, if this, then do this. And I'm like, bro, there's so many options, right? You just kind of make it out like it's really binary, And don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for it. But like I say, if you know all these things, you can make the best decision for number one, right? So that's the first thing to say. And then the second thing to say is this, and this is a very extreme opinion, and this opinion doesn't necessarily represent me, but it's interesting to know that this is a school of thought or a logical process that has yielded success for people who espouse it or perpetuate it, right? So anyway, have you heard of Alex Hormozi?
Of what, sorry?
Alex Hormozi?
No, I haven't. No, sorry.
So no, it's fine. So he's a bit like Gary V. Heard of him?
Mate, I'm so out of touch with anything which is worthy to know, because I'm just a dental student with my head down trying to get through uni in Slovakia. So don't ask me names, don't ask me people, don't ask me concepts. I'm here to learn from people like yourself. That's why I've got you on today. So for me, you are my big fish.
Oh wow! Well, I'm flattered. You make me blush over here. You know what? Right? But Chris Williamson, you've heard of him? No?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Or actually, I've got a better one. Diary of a CEO, right? Steve Bartlett, right? Everybody knows him.
Yeah? Everybody knows him. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so those would be like, I would say Alex Hormozi and Gary Vee are kind of like American versions of those guys.
Okay, right.
Is the best way I would describe them. And actually, you should check out Alex Hormozi's stuff. Some particular.
I will do.
But he has this one. I can't remember. He released like 3 podcasts a week, but there was one podcast that he released, and he was like talking about the S&P 500.
Yep.
But he was also talking about the S&Me 500.
Ah, right.
I really like that little distinction that he made because it was clever, I thought. Anyway, so he was in his philosophy, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but this is what he said in the podcast, and I do think there's some logic to this. He was like, yeah, you've got the S&P, which is going to give you like 10% returns every year, and definitely we should have some capital in that, because remember, that is not financial advice. Everybody is listening, right? Definitely not financial advice. Definitely not, right? But if you look at the annualized returns, it's what, like 9.6% since.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good, yeah.
And he's like, okay, cool. You can basically get that, no brainer. Remember, guys, not financial advice, for the right person in the right time frame. And he actually didn't put it.
You didn't say it. He said it.
I'm quoting him, guys. I'm just quoting him. But you know what? He should have put some disclaimers in that podcast, I thought. But anyway, where were we? So you can get that. S&Me. The S&Me is the alternative. And if we've got 10% versus something that can boost our cash flow by 20% in a year, that's literally twice as much. Imagine stacking that year on year. Yeah. that's another way of looking at it. But here's the thing: the problem with the SME 500 is it comes so much down to the individual and their execution. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot more variables in there.
Yeah.
Like, you can hear something really cool. Actually, is someone actually going to apply it? That's two different things. So I've made it sound really simple. But anyway, it's just a cool way of thinking about it. So anyway, back to, first of all, let me pause again. With me, all my total sense.
100%. So far, 100%. I'm just hoping the listeners are on board, but more than likely they're smarter than I am, so they're doing well.
Fair enough, smarter than us both. Hopefully they're following. But yeah, S&P, S&Me, I thought that was really cool. So my personal philosophy is maybe not 100% S&Me, but definitely prioritizing the S&Me. And what does that look like? It looks like becoming a high value dentist. It looks like being two separate skills: becoming a high value dentist, being able to be remunerated really well for that, achieve the balance that you want in the here and now, enjoy your life today, and then also make provisions for the future as well, however that looks. And that's when it comes into that little quadrant that I was talking about before, the 4 different types of assets. Understand those, pick the one with the best characteristics related to your goals, and then harness that effectively. It's not an overnight thing. There's a fair few things to understand within that, but that is a really beautiful, see that little distillation that I shared just then? That was like 2-3 years before I could even articulate it that clearly. And it made that much sense in my head. So this is the point of listening to podcasts, right? It's like we can share that. Hopefully that will have accelerated someone's journey by like 2-3 years.
100%. But one thing that you've said there, which I agree with massively, right? Like, upskill yourself to a point where you almost are demanding a higher income for the work that you're putting in. But I think one thing that people fall down on is almost communicating and negotiating that bit. They might have the skill set, but they'll struggle to actually push that across and say, look, this is what I actually want from what I'm doing, and I deserve it. And they're justified in doing so. But that communication aspect, that negotiating, that just isn't present, right? So how do we, and again, this comes back right to point number one. We perceive money as evil. So discussing anything to do with money is almost like a taboo. And it's like, oh, I don't want to say it because I want to come across as like a money hungry so-and-so. How do we overcome that in today's market? I think it was easier back in the day because it was kind of like, well, yeah, you did a good job and I'll pay you for it. Nowadays, it's like, oh, you're being greedy, and and we're attacking it from different angles. So how do people who have upskilled, put the time in, put 5-6 years into dentistry as an undergrad and done all of the work to get where they are, then translate that into, hey guys, come on, I've done this job for you, and I want to get paid accordingly for it. How do they manage that aspect of it, which is almost a soft skill, right?
Well, listen, you've hit the nail on the head. There's building the skill of our clinical dentistry, and then there is building our ability to articulate that to somebody. And that back in the day, I did not pay homage to that in terms of how valuable it is. I just thought, hey, I can explain this pretty well. But I think the first thing is to recognize that that's a skill to develop, which is what you were saying, which I did not appreciate at one stage. How does one start that journey or get better at it? First thing to acknowledge is, again, that is we could probably shoot about 10 podcasts on that. And actually, I have episodes which talk just purely about one little facet of this. I think do you know what? I actually think the best, first of all, the thing is to understand that there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
The very first thing to get in place is the belief side of things.
Right. So this is controlling your imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah. Well, it's just to think to yourself. I mean, if you can get your beliefs aligned with what you're doing, then at least you believe what you're saying, and your subconscious is aligned with your conscious. You know what I mean? Whereas if you think it's bad to talk about it, you can talk about all the technical know-how of how that's done specifically, but you'll never fully embrace it until you understand, number one, how it will help you, but also help other people as well. So I think it comes back to, this is why more money helps. This is why knowing more about money helps.
Yes.
Right? Because there's a lot of things that, in my opinion, that we all do and say about money on a daily basis, which are just, if we were more informed about it, I really feel like we would question those things. That's all I'm saying. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think this kind of, again, goes right back to point number one that you made right at the beginning, which is, learn the thing, whatever the thing is, understand that concept first, and then you'll actually be able to make a more informed decision. So I do like that. I think that, there's, even myself, like sometimes I'll go into clinics now, and we're quite new to patient interactions, right? In fourth year in Slovakia, we're not we know the theory, but now we're actually applying it. And sometimes I'll be sitting there and our professors are saying, who wants to do X, Y, and Z? And all of us are just cacking it because we're like, we studied it. We don't, and it's that understanding. The more that you understand the concept and drill it and do it, the more natural it becomes. So it's very much a case of whatever you want to apply this to, whether it's the concept of money, the concept of dentistry, the concept of investing, definitely do need to understand that. And that's a point that you made right at the beginning. I love that. I can really resonate with that. And I'm genuinely hoping that that's what we've all picked up from it, because really and truly, that's the thing that's going to take us from where we are to that next level and beyond, right?
Well, here's the thing. You know what you were just saying? I've devoted some time to thinking about this over the years. And now you can actually see bird's eye, the logic, the depth of the logic that I was getting at in that very first part of the podcast. Yes. This is like the layers to it. And I've been on this, dude, I've thought these thoughts to myself. And I've went like, oh, okay, it's kind of like this. Oh, wait, now I have to think about this. Oh, wait, and this is another layer. And then you have to make this decision. And then I'm like, it actually all links back to this, which is, and that's hilarious, right? Because we did not even script this at all. It's been completely ad hoc. And it's actually circled back to the point that we made at the very start. It's closed the loop, hasn't it?
I love it. I love it. I don't want to mar this podcast with any more blab. So I'm just going to wrap it up there, because I think that was so perfect. Like, genuinely, I think we've covered everything that I had wanted covered. And I think if we just take away from that to just understand concepts a bit better, apply yourself, believe in yourself a bit more as well. I think this is one of the major issues that students especially have, maybe newly qualified, maybe dentists across their whole careers have. They don't really believe in themselves enough to demand the justified response, be that in an income sense, days worked sense, whatever that might be. We need to really start coming to terms with basically what we're worth and applying that in the real world, and not be afraid that money is, as you've said at the beginning, it's a social construct, right? Don't be afraid of it. Take control of it, understand it, see how it benefits you and those around you, and make good out of that. And I think these are amazing points. I'm going to go back myself and listen to this from start to finish again and again a few times, because I think I picked up so much. I'm genuinely hoping that anybody listening has too. And before we kind of end it, I just want to hand it back over to you, let you have your mic drop moment. Anything else you'd like to tell us or leave us with before we close this one off?
Oh, wow. This is like when Eminem steps up on the stage and 8 Mile and he has to deliver. He has to deliver. Hopefully I can come through. Hopefully I can come through. What I would say is this. Do you know what? We talked about episode 300 earlier, and we talked about beliefs, and we talked about how the more you know helps you just really reevaluate your beliefs around money. And there's actually another episode called Some Things You Should Know About Money on the Dentistry Invest podcast. And that is about the history of the Bank of England. By way of mic drop, let's see what we got here. I'm going to do my best. I would say, guys, whatever it is, money is not the be all and end all. I want to just emphasize that on today's podcast. But what I'd also like to emphasize by the same token, that if it's going to help us for whatever reason in some shape or fashion in our life, that we should absolutely be able to talk about it. And the more you know about it is the more educated choices you can make. And I really hope that everybody has listened to this today in that spirit, and genuinely from the bottom of my heart, it enhances their life in some way.
Amazing stuff. Look, could not have said it better myself. That is amazing stuff. Doc, absolute pleasure for you coming on. And I'm calling it now. This is the first of many, because we didn't even scratch the surface today. So this has to happen again. And I'm sure everybody will want you back on. So everybody listening, thank you so much for joining us. Mind blown. Enjoy it. Play it back. Take notes. And we'll do another one very soon. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Take care,
I'm done for that. Thank you so much. Peace and love.
Lots of love. Take it easy. Bye.